This screencast will hopefully help you do the eJournal assignment where I have asked you to write a memo. And you may never have written a memo. If you have written a memo, and many of you have, we'll do it in a very particular way for English 302. Basically, we're following the guidelines in the text. You may, of course, when you actually are writing memos in a work setting, they'll have their own template, their way of doing memos, perhaps. But this is, for purposes of our class, the best advice we can use for writing memos. So I've asked you to create a blank single-space document for your memos. Do not use Microsoft templates for memos. There's a number of reasons for that. They're poorly designed. That's one reason. Second reason, students will use a template not realizing they have fields in the template. One of those fields might say CC colon in the heading. If you leave that blank, it looks silly because what that means is that's showing us who else has copies of this memo, just like an email. If you leave it blank, it just shouldn't be there. If it's not copied to anyone, there's no CC line. So templates mislead us. They also can often at the bottom say confidential or top secret, but you've actually addressed it to the entire accounting department or the entire sales department or the entire engineering floor. So you can see why we're just going to avoid templates. The purpose of the class is to become better document designers and thoughtful users of documents. So for all of the memos for this class, and there are many, many memos in the face-to-face class, some fewer in the online class, but you will be asked more than once to write a memo. Let's follow these guidelines. So do not use a template in Microsoft. Just open a blank new document because you want to control the design of this page. Assume that we will always single space our memos, and in the slide following here I show how to set that. Single space for all memos, and again Microsoft Word by default is going to give you 1.8 spacing or random spacing or spacing they thought was groovy or spacing that's common to blogs. So this is strictly a print document that might be emailed and circulated later. As you set up your header, and that's the 4 lines at the top, it goes to, then it says from, and then there's a date, and then there's a subject line that says RE colon, or sometimes just says subject colon. And that's a critical piece of information. As you know from email, you'll decide what to read and what to skip based on the subject line. And in order to do that effectively, you need to have a very clear subject line so that if anything is actually important, like a notice from the college that your tuition is past due and you will be suspended, or a note from your bank that your credit card has unusual activity, that has to catch your attention quickly. And the way we do that without using giant red letters is we write a very clear and compelling subject line. And I've added here, when we study the role of written communication in workplaces, and there have been decades of work on this, we find that many of the engineering disasters that have occurred in this country have occurred because of a poor PowerPoint with too much information on it, and people didn't see the critical information, or a memo where the subject line just said, like in the case of a Chicago flood where there was a critical piece of equipment in need of repair, and the subject line should have stated imminent danger of serious flooding if Unit X isn't repaired in 3 days. It just said something like inspection results. Well, that went to the bottom of the pile because if it's a routine inspection, why would you pay attention to it? The Challenger disaster, the memo or a series of memos and letters between NASA and one of their subcontractors concerning the O-ring. Numerous engineers questioned how well the O-rings would perform on the Challenger. They were concerned about the exact problem that happened. There's a failure in the O-ring leading to loss of structural integrity, leading to loss of life, and absolute national tragedy. And again, those letters and emails and their subject lines did not, the information about the potential failure of an O-ring and catastrophic results was at the bottom of the last page and wasn't referred to. It just in the subject line said O-ring. So throughout the semester, as appropriate, we need to get accustomed to think of the reader and where do you want this to be in the reader's pile of reading information. So that's why we emphasize a clear subject line, and that's why I've used this bulleted point here, clear and descriptive header, especially the subject line. And then as you look at the example in modules, notice things like how it's organized and presented. We could have used bold in organizing the memo. We could have used other methods like spacing to make it easy to read. Because basically you're writing a memo that conveys a list of 3 sources in the eJournal assignment and a very brief description of what the article is about, what the problem the article describes. So as you compose your memo, you can certainly copy the one online in terms of formatting, but you can also develop your own formatting. Could have used a bulleted list, a numbered list. So think of your reader and how they will process the information to make it easier to read. But also notice in the example I will post online, which is from a computer engineering student, 2 of the sources were cited not quite correctly. So I'll talk more about that perhaps later, but do look at the example and do notice it's not perfect, but it's designed well. It gives you an example for how we'll be writing memos in this class. So to do this, I am using Windows 8, and some of you are probably using Windows 7 or lower, and you may or may not have, when you open Word, you may or may not have the option for a blank document. This is what we used to open in, say 2007, 2010, 2013. You'd have the option of a blank document, which is nice. And in 08 and perhaps 7, I can't remember, you had to go out of your way to choose a single-spaced document, but that is exactly what you want to do. Select a single-spaced document, if at all possible. If not possible, the next slide or 2 will show you how to set up a Word document. And what you'll need to do is this. Even if you have opened a blank document, you'll still need to check the spacing. The spacing is done by clicking on this paragraph icon up here in your paragraph ribbon, where you control how your paragraphs look. Come down to spacing. Check this before and after. We want both of these to say 0. That way we have a truly single-spaced, easy-to-read document that doesn't waste paper or digital space. You also want to set your line spacing at 0. So if you're having trouble, and this is very important in the heading, because that's one of the first things I'll notice is if your heading is not single-spaced, it's visually, to me, inconsistent with the rest of the document. So please do set this before you start typing. Also, up here in the upper left, Times New Roman is, and this may have changed in the last decade or so, but Times New Roman is one of the friendliest fonts for printers, and it is a very easily read font. So scroll down. If you click up here, you'll get a drop-down menu. Look for Times, starts with a T, New Roman, and we want 12 up here instead of 11 for readability. Notice over here as you set up, you can set as a default, hopefully, this spacing. I haven't really tried it yet, but these are your preferences, and I hope that if you are able to use this dialog box, you can set that single spacing as a default. When all that is said and done, for the eJournal assignment, and I haven't talked about why we're doing it, but it is another very convenient way to enter the discussion going on in professional fields. It's different from leaping into ProQuest or Web of Knowledge. It's a good thing to know about. It will show you journals you were unaware even existed that you can go browse, and there will be a tutorial on how to navigate eJournals where I'll get more into that. Back to the memo format, single space, to me, from you, and notice a clear subject line as to what this memo concerns, the date, and then always the very next thing will be a short, clear statement about the purpose of the memo. Why are you writing the memo? This memo shows 3 current issues in the career field of computer network administrator. Then it starts to list the articles. What's missing here is the title of the article. I wouldn't be able to find it with this information. And that's the whole reason we do it, is so that, oh, I'd like to read that. What's the address? It's like an URL, but it's in print convention. So remember, we need to get the title of the article in there. Theoretically, it is findable here. It's a 10-page article, 20 pages. It's fairly lengthy. So, and then the next article is a complete citation. When you look at the example online, you will probably see that the third one is also incorrect. I'm not sure why here we've said where we retrieved it, and up here we did not. So that's also inconsistent. Whatever we're doing in APA citation, we want to be consistent all the way throughout our document. So we do need a journal title here. You can check the back of your book where it says APA citation, or you can generate a citation from your database. But I am told that now in APA we no longer say where we retrieved it. I am not sure why. I like to know myself. But if you're going to leave it off here, then you would leave it off here. And likewise down the line. So that is how we're formatting memos for the class.